So there is, quite a disconnect in terms of how much money is being plowed in versus how much money so far is coming out.
Go ahead, Badju.
I was just saying it's the marriage of history and TikTok, and whoever thought that would be a thing.
What could go wrong?
Yes, absolutely. Well, this was the marriage of history because this was our anniversary edition, 2 years of AI Decoded. So there you go, a little bit of history.
And yet we haven't aged a day, Christian.
No, well, speak for yourself, Stephanie. Speak for yourself. Welcome to this special edition of AI Decoded. It's our 2-year anniversary, amazingly so. The avatars are waiting in the wings, yet somehow Stephanie and I are still employed. And we will, as ever this week, be diving into the bigger questions shaping the future of AI. Here to decode it all from the Financial Times, and back with us for a second time, the FT's AI editor, Madhumita Murgia. She's the author of the acclaimed book, Code Dependent. She's just interviewed exclusively for the FT Nvidia CEO Jensen Huang, an interview in which he warned China could soon overtake the US in the AI race. And also on the programme, from the generative AI studio one day is Conrad Quilty Harper. He'll be telling us all about their newly released AI-generated movie, Midnight Drop, which is creating quite the buzz. The big streamers like Netflix suddenly taking an interest. We'll show you an exclusive clip of that later in the programme. And yes, Dr. Stephanie Hare is back, regular co-host here on AI Decoded, author of the book, Technology is Not Neutral. Welcome to you all. Now, hello. The big question that all commentators on AI are talking about at the moment, are we in a bubble? Bit of context for you here. The big seven, that's Nvidia, Microsoft, Apple, Alphabet, Amazon, Meta, and Tesla, collectively have a market cap greater than the Chinese economy. Nvidia alone is worth more than Japan, the world's third largest economy. So, Madhumita, what does Jensen Huang think? Are we heading for a crash, or is this a genuine technological pivot?
I think Jensen Huang has to believe and does believe that this is not a bubble. And there is, very much expectations are matching the demand. This is what he said in our conversation on stage alongside 5 other, sort of foundational builders of AI technology. And they agreed with him. And these are scientists who have helped sort of develop the technology over the years. And he talked about the potential of the technology being way beyond what we're seeing today, not just the generative AI stuff that we're doing with sort of, writing better emails or increasing productivity, but looking at things like coding using AI. He talked about a company they use internally to code at Nvidia. Healthcare is the other big one. And I think the other scientists agreed that the sort of impact that we're going to see, they don't feel is overblown because the technology is so powerful and has this potential. The headline here is expectations are running well ahead of the reality of where we are today, right? So, just to give you some numbers, so US venture capitalists who are investors that put money into AI startups, they've put about $160 billion so far into the technology, and we haven't really seen outcomes yet. And in comparison, if you look at the sort of 2000, the dot-com bubble, they had put about 10.5 billion in 2000, which if you adjust for inflation is about 20 billion. And you compare that to what's probably going to be 200 billion at the end of this year. So it's like sort of 10 times more money being plowed in. And if you look at the companies that are building AI, the startups, you have startups that are making, say, about $5 million, and they're valued at 100 times that. They're looking for valuations of $500 million. So there is, quite a disconnect in terms of how much money is being plowed in versus how much money so far is coming out. But I think, what we're also seeing is, unlike the dot-com bubble, there is still huge demand for the technology, right? And the infrastructure that's being put into place, which is why people like Nvidia are so valuable, the chips, the cloud companies, they are using all of their infrastructure. So this is what Jensen said in his interview, when we talked. He said back in the dot-com bubble days, there was fiber that was laid, that was dark. There was too much fiber, it wasn't being used. There wasn't enough demand. But today, all the GPUs, all the chips are all lit up. with people using it, right? So I think this is, the technology is powerful, and the lots of people who've looked at technology over the years say it could catch up eventually. There is still a lot of demand. The infrastructure is being used, but of course there's going to be some casualties. There will be some popping along the way. Yeah.
Well, of course, the CEO at Google, Sundar Pichai, has done an interview as well for the BBC with Faisal Islam. It's on iPlayer if you missed it. And he argues that this spending frenzy that we're seeing is rational because AI, in his view, is the next big shift, like the internet or the mobile phone. And the huge overshoot in spending, he says, is simply the price of progress. Have a watch.
Given the potential of this technology, the excitement is very rational. It's also true when we go through these investment cycles, there are moments we overshoot, right, collectively as an industry. We can look back at the internet right now. There was clearly a lot of excess investment, but none of us would question whether the internet was profound or did it drive a lot of impact. It's fundamentally changed how we work digitally as a society. I expect AI to be the same. So I think it's both rational, and there are elements of irrationality through a moment like this.
But Stephanie, the hype, we've seen huge scale up in the last 12 months.
Yeah, I think people are starting to get a more realistic and balanced assessment of where we are in the evolution of AI. So when ChatGPT came out only 3 years ago now, it feels like a decade ago, but it was only 3 years ago, people expected to see that change overnight. Now, this year, rather than people thinking we're moving into the era of agentic AI, which was the big, prediction back in January at the start of 2025, really 2025's headlines have been dominated by these investments in AI infrastructure. So we're talking data centers, and we're talking those chips that Nvidia has profited so beautifully from. That is going to take a very long time to build out. And if you then talk to the utilities companies and the water companies in every country around the world, they are looking to go, is our electricity grid fit for purpose? In every case, the answer to that is no. Do we have enough water? Are we building data centers in places where we can get that water versus electricity mix correct and balanced with the rest of the population's needs? Because they have to be, otherwise you get blackouts or water shortages. This is a multi-year process. I actually think we're going to be seeing this AI story run and run and run probably for the next, honestly, 10 to 20 years, because we have to get the infrastructure piece right. This brings me to my question for Madhumita with that incredible scoop she got with Nvidia's CEO Jensen Huang saying he thinks that China is going to win the AI race. China is going very big on all sorts of technologies, not just AI. They've got a commitment to nuclear. They're still using coal. They can get things built faster than any democracy in the West. What do you think he meant by that when he said that China's going to win?
Yeah, that was really interesting because he'd sort of stopped short of ever having said that before. And I think, paraphrasing really what he said to me, he was talking a lot about why optimism matters in this story, right? And, in the US and the UK as well, he pointed out that we're spending a lot of time talking about regulation, talking about how do we control this technology, also talking about the ethics of the technology, things that, I've written about, what could be the possible downsides and negative impacts of this technology. And he felt that was hampering our ability to sort of apply this technology and let it achieve its full potential. Whereas he contrasted with China, where he said, the technology already is being built into every application imaginable, right? From whether it's entertainment or whether it's, in retail and so on. And he was saying, I can see it happening already. People are using this technology. And the thing he really pointed to was power and the availability, like you said, of power and energy in China. So, in particular, like the way he phrased it is, power is free in China because the country has been subsidizing energy for some of their own local champions there and allowing them, to build using energy, very, very cheaply. Whereas, as you said, there's a supply constraint in the West. And that actually is why, some people say they don't see this as a bubble, going back to the bubble question, because actually the demand currently is, it's the supply that people are worried about, building the data centers.
That's a really important point. In fact, there was a piece in Forbes magazine this week. Michael Burry, you remember the investor who anticipated the subprime crisis, and he bet on that. Now he's shorting the AI market. And Forbes argued this week that if, as Sundar Pichai says in that BBC interview, the economics of AI resemble the economics of infrastructure, so compute and energy, rather than the user experience, which you've been referring to with the dot-com bubble, then perhaps Michael Burry's bet is a bad one, because as Forbes point out, the first telephone networks looked irrational. The investment in electricity and the grid looked irrational. Railroads looked irrational, Conrad. They all delivered.
Well, Michael Burry shut his hedge fund this week, so he was making bets against the AI market, and he's now just said, you know what, the market's irrational, I'm shutting my fund, I'm returning the money to investors. Yes, I do think you have to see things from that context. It's hard to see in your daily life the potential of exponential change in technology. So thinking 5 years out, if you think exponentially, what will this technology look like in 5 years? And as Madhu said, and as Stephanie said, it's, this is not just one thing. This is, in theory, across every single bit of our lives, right? One of the biggest uses of AI is going to be potentially automated cars, cars that can drive themselves. When you think about how many cars are on the road, and every single one of those cars has an Nvidia chip that has to process data in real time so that it doesn't cause accidents. Think about, the big bulk computing of, disease research and into drugs, which is a different type of computing AI. And I think that's what lies behind this huge investment, is the bet.
Or AlphaFold. AlphaFold.
Yeah.
I mean, hundreds of millions of years of PhD research done in just a few months. I mean, AI predicted the 3D structure of every protein known to life. There is a risk that we just take that for granted when actually it is delivering.
Yeah, well, we're still waiting to see a drug that's fully been discovered and designed by AI. That's not to say it will never happen, but there have been, billions of dollars over the last decade put into this exact question, of can we design and discover new drugs using AI? And while the technology has got more powerful, and AlphaFold is an amazing scientific breakthrough, it won a Nobel Prize, we still don't have that drug. So I think that's the question, right, for investors and for everybody. Yes, we can see what this could do. We can see why you need money to get there, but we haven't seen anything really yet that we can point to. So it's about sort of, can people hold their nerve and wait until we start, until we see that first drug discovered by AlphaFold and developed through the pipeline. There are still physical constraints like energy and like, humans. We're part of the constraint. And so, we need to wait and watch.
Just on that point of constraints, since you mentioned it, Euronews had an interview this week, Stephanie, with one of the people who checks the market, Jordi Visses from 22V Research. Let me just read you what he says. This is not the dot-com bubble, because demand is massively outpacing supply. The next AI investment phase will not be defined by who can spend the most, but by who can execute through constraint. In other words, as Madhumita is saying, it is a problem of capacity and meeting demand within those energy constraints.
Exactly. And I think also being very realistic, if we again look at this from a sort of satellite view, looking down on Earth, we're talking a lot about the United States and how AI is rolling out in the United States because the Magnificent Seven companies are largely based there. We also know that China is a superpower in AI. They're going strong. And then we've got some pretty good ecosystems happening here in Europe and in the United Kingdom. That is not the entire world. So again, if we take the long view and we think that this is a promising technology that we're building out over time, we need to think about that growth over decades, if not the whole century. So we are just getting started. It's almost like, the market is not patient. The market wants returns daily, if not based on quarterly results for companies. But if you're looking at a fundamental step change in technology and humanity, this has decades, if not centuries, to roll.
Let's turn to one of the more exciting frontiers in artificial intelligence, and that is filmmaking. As regular viewers of this program will know, the team from One Day have been with us since the earliest days of AI Decoded, helping us to understand the evolution of generative video. And today we've something special. It's an exclusive look at their 12-minute short. It's called Midnight Drop. It's their most ambitious project yet, potentially a landmark moment for AI-assisted cinema. So grab the popcorn. Here's a taste of Midnight Drop.
Manual control engaged. Tanker is at hour 3. Column.
Marco 4-2, Spirit 6-1, in position for pre-contact.
Roger. Ledge screen, moving in. Closure rate 5 knots, lateral offset 3 feet. Steady, steady. Contact confirmed. Holding.
شهر در محاصره است و مردم برای
Well, congratulations, comrade, to you and the team there at One Day. Let's just be quite clear. Samir, who we normally have on, he's not a film director in the traditional sense. He's not following a traditional script. He's not designing and going out to film the movie. He's giving instructions to the AI. That's what we call prompt craft, right?
I wouldn't say, I say he is a director, actually, and he does consider himself a director. There's 2 directors of this film, Buha Kazmi is the other one. And I have to say, experiencing them, think of this film and produce it and publish it and get it out there and get it onto the internet, there is very little difference in terms of the actual process from making a traditional film. The difference is you don't go and film something. We did not go and have the traditional middle bit of the production of a film, but we did have, an ideas process. There was thinking about what film we wanted to make. There was scripting. There was casting. We filmed actors performing that script. When the film was generated, that's the bit that's different. We didn't go to Tehran in Iran to film a street scene. We used a bespoke process to generate those visuals, but also those visuals use directing expertise. There was, when you're writing, this is where the sort of prompting comes in. So there's a bit of semantics, really. You can call it prompting, you can call it directing. It's the same thing. You have to decide what scene you want to generate, which means you have to decide, is it a wide shot? Is it at night? Is there grain? Is there, what's the actual message you're trying to tell? And I think this has been quite an eye-opening experience for me, watching Buha and Samir produce this film, which is that you still need all the traditional skills of making, beautiful, emotional films. And you actually need the expertise about that behind the scenes.
So what I hadn't quite appreciated, there was a process where you film actors fulfilling the roles in the film. So it's not scraped from other movies or other productions. You're not asking the AI to make a judgment on who it uses or the facial expressions it might use. That is all real, is it? And then it's adapted using AI.
That's right. I mean, I was there in Samir's living room when we had 3 Farsi-speaking actors come and perform the script. So, in a traditional environment, you'd actually do this on location and film the script. But we did it on very low tech, filming, and we recorded it on phones. And there was a to and fro with the directors about, should we use this line or that line? And then those visuals were then sort of uploaded to our process, and the visuals were generated over the top, and then the lips were synced, the sound was tweaked. Samir actually voices the voice of the B2 pilots, so it's got radio chatter over the top. So it's you can film something that looks like almost Hollywood. I think
Mm.
Hollywood, as good as Hollywood, in your living room. We literally did this in Samir's living room.
I've got loads of questions, but perhaps Madhu and Stephanie have questions as well.
Yeah, I have questions, and I wanted to make a comment as well. My question is, if you think, and I've seen the clip as well, and it is, amazing that you can create that. But I think I found it amazing because I knew it was all done by technology. And I guess viewers need to separate, do you love the film anyway, regardless of who made it? And my question would be sort of, what did you think were the constraints or could have been better, given you did this in a completely different way?
In terms of the technical limitations, they're getting less and less relevant.
Not just technical limitations, just as a filmmaker, I'm curious if you guys felt limited by this process at all.
I mean, in some ways, it's a film we could never have made with the budget we had. And, you can't film very easily in Tehran. Directors do film in Tehran, but they have to use subterfuge. And, you'd have budgets for explosives, for, a VFX budget to create a B-2 bomber in flight. This is impossible for the level of spending that you have to do as an independent filmmaker. You'd have to spend millions, tens of millions on this if you wanted to shoot it in camera. So I think from that perspective, it's allowing us to shoot impossible films based on the economic constraints. In terms of the limits, you have to generate a lot of imagery. You have to spend a lot of money with these AI platforms, and it's not a process where you imagine a scene and then you prompt it and then it appears exactly how you want it. It's very much an iterative process, and it requires craft and attention to detail and lots of tweaking later. And it doesn't do some things well. We hired a very good colorist to color grade the scenes, and there's many tools and other people. We licensed a beautiful piece of music that's original and match the scripts, so these things aren't quite there in terms of the technology, and I think
but I just wonder, does it change your tolerance for failure or experimentation in perhaps the same way that digital photography changed our tolerance for mistakes?
I think so. I think you can, we reshot things, as in, we took a scene that was in the finished film, and you can go back and generate a different camera angle, right? So I don't like the camera angle's too low on the cat. Can I move it up a little bit? Well, in the past, that would require, a whole new production day, and you go on
shooting.
You don't have to do that anymore.
Yeah.
I think that's where sort of the commercial side of One Day. So we're hoping to make advertising films, and the process of making an advert is you have a client, and a client sees the finished product, and they often have a tweak that they want to make, which would cost maybe tens of thousands of pounds. Well, nowadays you can, with the AI tool, go in and reshoot that for £1,000. So it's very interesting how it's sort of the generative tools are getting into the sort of cracks of video production, and when that's where they're best deployed, is where something that would be impossible or cost a lot of money, well, now you can go generate that imagery.
That is it for this week's anniversary edition. A huge thank you to our guests. Thank you to Madhu. Thank you to Conrad, and also to Stephanie again. If you do want to get in touch, remember you can email us, aidecoded@bbc.co.uk. I think viewers are just getting used to that. So aidecoded@bbc.co.uk. If there's something you want us to cover, or if you've got issues or concerns you want to raise, then of course do send us a short message. You can catch us on iPlayer as well, and all the past episodes there on the BBC YouTube website. Thank you very much for watching. We'll see you next time.